It's Friday, fuckers. And it's your boy Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, episode 167. And we're coming at you ahead of a very bad event. I've tried to write shit about this event all week. Keep losing the will to live. Even, like, Unibet were like, can you write us something this week? I was like, there's nothing happening on this card. And then bonus, I finally get in the mood to talk about the card for the Friday podcast, as I normally do, and then I find out that the card is on tonight. So this podcast will be up for about 3 or 4 hours before the event starts, I imagine. Oh, false alarm. The Reddit MMA calendar is wrong. It's not on the 20th, it's on the 21st. So it is on Saturday. Yay! Let's talk about the one bit of news that's going on this week. Dave Branch tested positive for a steroid, can't remember which one, but he got a 2-year ban. He's already 37, 38, so, effectively ending his, well, you'd say effectively ending his MMA career, but, guy's getting older and older now. That was a completely vacuous statement. Everyone's getting older and older all the time. Guys are getting older and older and competing effectively in the UFC at older and older ages. But, yeah, I said might as well just retire. But I think the UFC have actually done him a solid, because most recent news I read, he'd been cut from the UFC. And a lot of the reactions I read online were like, great, ban these cheaters, and then cut them. And you're like, well, the ban only takes effect if they're under UFC contract. Because the UFC have a fairly decent record. I'm not going to say the best, because they've booked Michael Bisping within a medical suspension before they shipped Rashad Evans around commissions. They hid Andrei Arlovski when he was on a 4-fight losing streak, all by finish. They took him overseas to fight until he got a win. But with drug suspensions, the UFC tends to be pretty good. They could have, at any point during Nick Diaz's drug suspension for marijuana, 5 years for marijuana, if you remember correctly, they could have taken him overseas. They could have taken him to China. I'm sure, well, they could have taken him to Japan. Japan loves Nick Diaz, but they could have taken him to China. I'm sure they'd love him. They could have taken him literally anywhere else in the world. They could have taken him to somewhere else in the US. Like, there's only 2 or 3 commissions who actually give a shit about doing their job. And even then, like, there's levels to that. They don't give a shit about doing their job when they catch, say, Floyd Mayweather using an illegal IV days before, it might have been hours before the Manny Pacquiao fight. Because they'll lose money if they call off the fight. But there's a couple of them that do respect each other's drug suspensions and medical suspensions. However, you can always take a fighter who's failed a drug test or is banned for drugs in California or whatever, take him down to, I don't know, Virginia. Texas is a famously rinky-dink commission. But the UFC doesn't do that. So by allowing Branch to be cut, they've actually done him a fairly big solid there. He can spend the next 2 or 3 years of his life fighting in PFL, which used to be World Series of Fighting, where he was the champion. Bellator, I'm sure they'd love him. He'd be a great addition to that middleweight division of 3 people. Ryzen even, though he's not really a Ryzen type fighter, if we're honest. Though it would be great to see him come in absolutely ripped in Ryzen, just get pack on 20 pounds and be a light heavyweight there. He could fight Jiri, I suppose. They're always looking for someone. Well, they're not really looking for someone for Jiri. They just grab someone for Jiri to fight from Bus Depot. But yeah, I mean, cutting Dave Branch here is not bad for Dave Branch. It's not punishing him for cheating. If you remember, Vanderlei Silva, his entire problem was that he ran from a USADA test and then got banned for however long, and it was because he was under UFC contract that he couldn't compete again for however long it was until he fought Chael. So that was the big piece of news this week. Let's have a look at this card. UFC on ESPN Plus 17. Rodriguez versus Stevens. Right, there are 3 fights I care about on this, but, there's an awful lot of people who are here just for the sake of being here. Fun enough, Tyson Nam is getting a shot in the UFC. Tapology has him as the number 1 flyweight in Hawaii. But Tyson Nam has bounced around a lot of places, and he's a decent enough fighter. He went to Fight Nights Global and pulled off a bit of an upset against Ali Bagutinov. And yeah, so he's on a 4-1 streak at the moment. Not bad. And he's fighting Sergio Pettis. Sergio Pettis, obviously, a massive letdown, just generally. I mean, he was getting close to putting it all together. When he fought Henry Cejudo, he'd got like a few wins in the bag. He'd fought Joseph Benavidez, who had forgotten how to strike overnight, and he tooled Joseph Benavidez in that fight. And then he fought, I believe it was Cejudo, and just got, he fought what's his name? Little Yoel Romero, the guy with the beard. GCF Formiga, sorry, that's the one. He lost to Henry Cejudo. He put on a great fight against Joseph Benavidez. Then he fought Jussier Formiga, and he let Jussier Formiga get on his back along the fence and then did nothing. It was just no urgency at all. He just stood there going, "Yep, I'm losing the round," and then he just continued doing that for 3 rounds. The appeal of Sergio Pettis before he got to the UFC was, oh my god, a Pettis in the flyweight division, except he's now fought there for 6 years, he's had 13 fights, he's never finished anyone, and I don't think he's even been close. He's just not a very exciting fighter. I mean, sometimes he looks crisp, sometimes he doesn't, but he's just not interesting, to be honest. However, he's fighting Tyson Nam. Tyson Nam really shouldn't be at the level of someone who's fought several of the best flyweights in the world. Let's see what happens there. Fun fact, though, we're back at flyweight. This is the triumphant return of the flyweights on a card no one gives a shit about. My girl Angie Hill's fighting Ariane Carnelossi, who's 12-1. She's number 2 ranked in Brazil. However, those can always be misleading because Priscilla Cachoeira was ranked pretty well and undefeated on the Brazilian circuit, and she's awful. However, this lass only lost her first fight and then has been on an 11-fight streak since then, or 12 fight. She was due to debut last month, but her opponent got injured, so now she's fighting Angie Hill here. Angie Hill, just coming off that loss to Yan Zhao Nan, beat Jodie Esquibel before that, a couple of losses before that. Standard Angie Hill stuff. Fun to watch on the feet, but not nearly as good on the ground or in the clinch. What else? Irene Aldana's fighting. Fair enough. This one's the good one. Brandon Moreno, who they're bringing back mostly because he's Mexican. They're bringing back the flyweight division for this one event because they needed an extra Mexican on the card, so they got Brandon Moreno back, having cut him and sent him to LFA. But, Moreno was never boring. He's fought Sergio Pettis before, lost in, when was that, 2017, fought Alejandro Pantoja. It was he who had the cursed bout with Ray Borg that was booked 4 times. And then Ray Borg got glass in his eye and stuff like that, and the fight never actually came off. But Askar Askarov's a little bit more interesting, having watched him go through some of his... ACB or Fight Nights Global, but I watched some of his Russian fights, and he's actually pretty fun. Good finisher, decent hitter, not like a great striker, technically, but has decent pop for a flyweight, and a lot of his finishes are by interesting submissions. He's got a rear naked choke, anaconda, twister, guillotine in his last 4. I started writing about him for my prospect watch when I was doing that. I'm going to return to that actually because I just found someone who I really loved today. Yesterday. But yeah, I'm quite excited for Askar Askarov. I'm assuming Askarov is son of Askar and that his dad's called Askar and he's basically Askar Jr. It's always fun to try and work out with these names what they mean. Then you co-main, you've got Alexa Grasso versus Carla Esparza. A bit of a traditional striker versus grappler because Alexa Grasso, good boxer, especially for the women's divisions, but a good boxer generally, I'd say. When she's on, when she's not on, she just walks herself to the fence. She fought Heather Jo Thingy, whatever her name was, from The Ultimate Fighter in her first UFC fight. I think that was her first UFC fight. Let me just check. If there's one thing we care about on this show, it's factual accuracy and correct pronunciation of names. She beat Josie Esquibel in Invicta, and then she came to UFC, and then the Invicta division was rebranded the UFC division, and she fought Heather Jo Clark. And in that fight, she won it, but she kept backing herself onto the fence, and Heather Jo Clark was just walking with punches spasmodically, and didn't, it wasn't great. Then she's had 3 very unimpressive performances against Herrig Marcus and Tatiana Suarez. We're all hot on Tatiana Suarez. We reckon she's going to be the next big thing. So no harm done there. But that Karolina Kowalkiewicz fight, the last one, she actually looked really good. And we all went, oh yeah, this is what we remember from that Mizuki Inoue fight back in 2015. Did a great job floating around the edge of the ring, coming in with the 1-2. She'd go in deep with the 2, hit her, get her head offline, and then she'd come back and close the door with the left hook. And Kowalkiewicz, just being Kowalkiewicz, she'd walk right onto it. Really just good performance all round, I thought. So she's against Esparza. Esparza obviously only really wrestling. I've seen her throw some good low kicks before, actually, but more gutsy in her striking than she is good in her striking. But she's one of those people who can pleasantly surprise you when she gets in trading with people just on grit more than anything. Never going to be K1 Carla Esparza. She's never going to be Lumpini ready. But she is, if you don't expect anything from her and then you enter a trade with her, you might get caught and surprised just by her willingness to throw. Even though a lot of the time, well, more so in the days when she was wearing like a singlet, she used to like really look uncomfortable under fire and just cover up and shut down. Mainly what you're looking for in this fight is that both of them are going to wear those awful oversized t-shirts, and anytime anyone kicks, their toes will get caught in the t-shirt. Grasso in her last fight was wearing like a wife beater, like the Bruce Willis cotton one. And Esparza, for every one of her fights, wears her dad's swimming t-shirt. Not great on the fashion front for these lasses, but it'll be interesting enough. I mean, what I'd expect in this one is Grasso to get pushed to the fence a lot. But Esparza is, there's enough holes in her defensively. And her footwork isn't great. Like, this is the whole thing. And we say this with Habib and stuff too. The offensive footwork only needs to rise to the level of defensive or counter-offensive footwork. So if someone's not circling the ring well and changing directions well, we don't have a fucking clue if you've got good ring cutting. It's just unlikely that you're going to start showing it, immediately. And then your main event is Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stephens. This was what I was trying to do all fucking week. I was going through fights, putting together stuff for a Filthy Casuals guide, and I just couldn't do it. Yair Rodriguez is, both of them are, to me, quite boring to watch a lot of the time. And I know that when you say that, people are going to go, but the bicycle kick on Philly, but the uppercut on Rafael dos Anjos in 2012. But, this is the thing with me, like, I used to say this when people bitched about Machida or Anderson Silva back in the day, doing nothing for long periods of time. This is me defending Anderson Silva, quite a rare one, but I'd say I would much rather watch someone not do something for a while and know that it matters when they do, than just watch someone flail, like Leonard Garcia. But these guys are like the complete opposite end of the spectrum, in that, they can knock each other, they can knock people out, they can probably knock each other out, but they throw so much, and it just doesn't work most of the time. Jeremy Stephens spends enormous amounts of the fight plodding after dudes throwing straight arm swings. I have no idea how he trains with Dominic Cruz every day and has no ring cutting whatsoever. And Yair Rodriguez just throws spinny shit all the time, and no one ever falls for it anymore because at a certain level you realise, Yair's just going to spin. I'll take a step back anytime it looks like he's going to do something. And then he can't spin. Well, he can't hit you with the spin, he'll just spin. The whole thing is that spinning works when you set it up with clever boxing and kickboxing and get guys into a normal fight and then throw something unorthodox, or when you put them against the fence and they circle off and you spin to meet them, or as a counter. And none of those are the way that Yair Rodriguez does them. It's always knee to the chest trying to stamp on the guy's lead leg. Oh, he's moved back a mile, my follow-up wheel kick has missed. Better run at him with my head down, doing front crawl with my fists. Sorry, I'm sounding really bitter, but I spent the week watching these guys' fights, and they are hard work. I guess, what we're going to see in this one is Yair Rodriguez, for all his spinning shit, he has great cardio, because he does it for 20, he did it against in that fucking awful Caceres fight, which is not on Fight Pass anymore. He spun for 25 minutes at Elevation in Mexico City, was it Utah? I can't remember. But somewhere very high up, might have been Denver, against Alex Caceres, and he did it for 25 minutes and still looked fairly fresh at the end. Here we're in Mexico City, so we're booked for 5 rounds. It's going to be smoggy. They're going to talk a lot about the elevation, and maybe Jeremy Stephens gets black lung and just drops dead in round 4. But it's going to be interesting because, like a lot of Yair Rodriguez's fights, you will see long periods where he's jogging, doing that thing where he's like running away from the opponent and looking over his shoulder along the fence. And I think that'll be very interesting against Stephens, who will either clothesline him for doing it if he gets close enough, or lose his patience and be like, come at me, bro, and just follow him around the ring for the entire fight. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they both come out and calf kick each other to shit, because that's like their best orthodox move, both of them. But, I hope Jeremy Stephens gets to kick in early, because if he's low kicking early and often, it's going to make spinning and running a lot harder. and then he can start landing his punches. I mean, that low kick is probably the best thing that's ever happened to Jeremy Stephens, because his footwork was just not happening, and his jab isn't there most of the time. He does do it, and sometimes he surprises you with his jab. It's kind of like a Cody Garbrandt jab, where you're like, damn, that's a nice jab. Well, I guess we'll see it next fight. So yeah, that's your main event. Really, I left off a couple of fights on this, because there's two on the undercard that actually have me hype. And they are Betch Kohea versus Sijara Eubanks, and Paul Craig versus Vinicius Moreira. Sijara Eubanks, obviously the queen, was going to fight Valentina Shevchenko, then they realised that she's actually too heavy for the division, which is the same thing that's happened with the Nico Montano, because the division doesn't need to exist. It's just there to put a belt on Valentina Shevchenko. But she's fighting Betch Kohea. This is a bantamweight fight. Who's Kohea beat recently? Because every time Betch Kohea beats someone, you are reminded of just how bad this division is. Oh, she's coming off back-to-back losses. Holly Holm, that head kick back in 2017, then Irene Aldana a couple of months ago. I feel like she fights a lot more than I'm seeing on her record, but it's always a treat when she does. She's one of the least coordinated fighters you'll ever see. One of the worst natural athletes in the UFC. Maybe the history of MMA, but Sijara Eubanks fought Roxanne Modafferi to a victory back in 2018, booked to fight Jessica Rai, fight fell through. Fought Aspen Ladd, back when Betch Kohea was last fighting in May. And that was a really good fight, actually. That was her, like, swinging wild, Aspen Ladd swinging back, and then Aspen Ladd grabbing a guillotine and trying to roll her over. I enjoyed that quite a lot. I get, the thing with Sijara Eubanks is that she does seem to hit harder than most women, but she doesn't, her thing is, like, swanging and banging, and it's not really effective. Like, if you put a good jab and a good inside low kick on her, a good calf kick, all these things that annoy and hurt but don't necessarily knock people out on their own, but set up good right hands and left hooks, I think you'd have a lot more, or she'd have a lot more success hurting people and finishing people even. But I mean, Kohea is just like, you got the one who likes to bang here with Sijara Eubanks versus Kohea, who again just sort of likes to bang but isn't very good at it. So I think this is probably Sijara Eubanks' fight, to be honest. And then Vinicius Moreira versus Paul Craig, great, because both of them are almost exclusively grapplers, but love to throw kicks and shit and don't really have any boxing. Paul Craig actually throws some pretty good kicks. It's pretty surprising how good he is kicking. Vinicius Moreira, oh my god, what was his last one? It was against that up-and-coming lad. I was going to say that Black Explosive lad. Yes, that Black Explosive. No, he fought Eric Anders since then. Fucking hell. He's doing badly in the UFC. Fought Alonzo Menifield back in January, and he was trying to throw back kicks to keep this big banger off him. Why? For first, why? But he was taking 3 steps to turn each time, where a back kick, particularly on the counter, should be like a jumping spin. The spin should be accomplished almost off the floor to actually get round quick enough. Menifield's doing it as a waltz. He's like, da 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 da, and then he kicks. And every time Menifield slid down the side and hit him in the head. And he did it 3 times, and then the 4th time he got knocked out for it. You're like, well, if you didn't learn the first 3 times, I think you deserve to be knocked out. But he quickly got smoked by Eric Anders a little while ago, when Eric Anders came back Lumpini ready. Just terrible fighter. But it would be very fun to see how he does against Paul Craig. He could just stand there getting kicked in the head. They could just trade awful spinning shit for 3 rounds. Or we could get a good grappling match out of it. Because there is, if there's one thing about Vinicius Moreira, it's that he's submitted a lot of dudes. Anyway, that's that card. As I said, bit of a shit show. It could be decent. Don't bother jumping in with your... Some of these cards with less names are actually the more exciting. Yeah, okay, cool, there can be knockouts on any card, but I'm trying to excite people for this, and there's fucking nothing to excite people. Right, let's do some questions. Hi Jack, I have a question about throwing the rear hand while keeping the front foot bladed inwards. Naoya Inoue, the monster, knocked out Juan Carlos Payana with a rear hand punch while keeping his foot bladed inward. I'm going to say toed inward. Check 214 of this video. He's linked with video. And I'm pretty sure that Manny has thrown it like this too. My confusion is twofold. Firstly, Inoue seems to throw the punch across his own body, but still manages to generate power to knock Piano out. Where is the power coming from? Second, maybe it's because I've had 2 knee surgeries, but throwing the rear hand with that much force whilst keeping the knee turned in seems dangerous to one's own health. Is there some bit of movement or body mechanic that I'm missing? I remember you talking about this, an old boxing book that recommended throwing the rear hand with the front foot bladed in, so I'm guessing you might have some answer. Anyway, thanks for your hard work. I'm a long-time reader/listener, brackets since the bloody elbow days. Ooh, you're old, incredibly old school. I often have questions but never write in. The answers seem to reveal themselves eventually, and thought I'd give it a go this week. Best, Dylan. Cheers, Dylan. Now, Naoya, I'm just going to say Inoue because I can't say his fucking first name. Just know that I'm not talking about Enson Inoue, or Mizuki Inoue. But in the Inoue knockout in question against Juan Carlos Piano. Fuck, I'm so bad at Mexican names and Japanese names. He steps in with a jab. I think his foot's inside his opponent's. You can't see it in the replay, but the important point is that he sort of like pivots off to the inside angle and throws the right hand sort of across himself with his lead foot pointed in, or appearing to point in. There's two things going on here. One is the stepping down the inside of the lead foot, which is something that Floyd Mayweather likes to do. Doesn't do it like all the time, but he does land some good shots with it against most of the southpaws that he fights. If you watch my primer to Floyd Mayweather, we were talking about Floyd versus southpaws, and that is one that that comes up several times. He'll step deep with the jab, and then he'll do like a wide step across to his right, and throw the right hand in from that angle, and you do sort of end up throwing it across yourself. And that lead knee / lead toed in thing is something we talked about in an article I wrote called "Punching from the Toes," I think it was, and it was just talking about the stance recommended by Edwin Hazlitt, who is seen as like one of the, that's one of the best texts on boxing. It's quite a simple book, but it has a lot of good mechanical information. But it does all come off this like pigeon-toed stance, which sort of links in with like the Sanchin stance of traditional Chinese and Japanese martial arts, with the toes with the lead foot toed in and the knee almost across the center line so that you can cover the groin. It's something you can play with because like with your lead foot toed in lead foot toed in isn't necessarily constricting when you're in like quite a bladed stance, but once you start squaring up, and that's the way that Edwin Hazlitt advises to do it. He has the back foot pointing towards the opponent and the lead foot pointing slightly across yourself. So that's a really awkward stance. Like that's a proper almost Sanchin style stance. But the idea is that because your power is coming from from the floor and through your legs and your hips. Having your back foot point at the opponent is the best way to drive straight into the right straight. And having the lead foot turned in a bit and the knee, as a result, is a great way to turn your hips back and turn in with the left hook or with a really stiff jab. And if you try it, just mess around with it. I mean, I don't use this stance at all when I'm sparring because I'm almost always sparring with kicks, and there's just no point having your foot that toed in because you'll get low kicked. But if you try, just experiment with it, you can get some decent pop on both hands from a toed in stance. And this is something that, again, this is going to come from like a traditional karate background. Goju and Shito and Ryu and things like that, and Kyokushin to an extent, are all very interested in Sanchin and the Sanchin stance. So you learn to move your hips and punch with the back hand a lot, while having the lead foot toed in and the lead knee, pulled in, drawn in across yourself. For Shotokan style karate, it's more like the Hangetsu Dachi, which is like a longer version of it. But you do get used to moving your hips in that way, and you can actually get some decent hip rotation even with your knee almost across yourself. I'm doing it now, sorry. But it's never comfortable, but it doesn't hinder you as much as you might think it would. Again, like the best thing I could say is check out the Edwin Hazlitt book. It's online everywhere at the moment, and have a little play with that stance because you can get some decent pop without having your knee free to move your hips through. I think part of that is like the natural way that you want to swing your hands. Like the overhand is quite a natural motion. I mean, not the actual landing of the fist, because almost everyone will try it and then break their thumb doing it. But the actual motion of the overhand is it's almost like the motion of throwing something very hard. Guys tend to step out into it. Your left foot goes out off to like 45 degrees or whatever and opens your hips up, and you're allowed to throw your hips onto it, as you twist. I think, that's what people want to do when they punch naturally, but you can get some decent pop restricting your hip motion with that lead knee. You don't have to open all the way up and throw through. And of course, like, high-level boxing, a lot of it's trying to cut down that motion so you don't step out for the big overhand. You try and throw everything off where your feet are. Anyway, cheers, Dylan. Hi, Jack. Can you explain the Wonder Boy 1-2 head kick combo? It seems like the portion of the combo with the hand should draw the opponent's hands up to defend, which puts them in a natural position to block the head kick. Are there examples of people throwing the same combo but kicking the body instead? What are the pros and cons of each? I don't train, so this could be an obvious answer that I, a filthy casual, am just missing. Here's an example of the combo I'm referring to from Ryan. He's linked to the James DeCour knockout, which you can check out on YouTube, but the Dan Stidgen knockout is the same technique. I really like this little setup because it seems like if you'd only seen one of those knockouts, you'd go, oh, that's an interesting thing that he adapted on the fly. The guy steps out to his side, so he's kicking not at like all the way through to 12 o'clock, pivoting on the lead leg, the standing leg. He's instead kicking to like 2 or 2:30 and letting the guy walk into it. But the fact that he's done it twice, or at least knocked dudes out with it twice, says that he probably plans it. But it's pretty cool. Like when he notices a guy circling off, and you can see this against Dan Stidgen. This was in the Filthy Casuals Guide to Stephen Thompson. Unfortunately, that's not up anymore because I take them all down. But he noticed Stidgen was like circling out towards Stidgen's left, which is Thompson's right, and James DeCour had been, or DeCour, whatever his name is, he'd been doing the same thing. But so you throw the 1-2 to get them moving offline. I think it works best when you know that that's their reaction, and then he throws the kick out to where they're circling to. So they think they're safe because his hands and his upper body are on one side of them as they step offline. If you step offline of someone who's punching at you, you're normally like, got past it, I'm alright. So really what it does is they're walking away laughing, and then that's a lamppost they're walking into. You could do it with the body kick too. I think really it works best as a counter to lateral movement. But the 1-2 body kick on the same side, I used to love that technique, that combination quite a lot. You don't really see it as much in like more traditional Muay Thai style combinations. They tend to like having all the power in the kick, whereas I really like throwing the 1-2 and just letting what's left of the hip carry the kick in. You're not going to get as hard a kick. But that was really useful in like point karate and things like that, where guys, or if you've just got anyone who's really reaching for your hands too, if you can get them parrying, you can just slot that body kick in immediately after. The hands are just there to get them moving their hands. Which is like you said, you punch to get them to do something so that you can kick them. I think that it's just that in the Wonderboy case here, the punches aren't to draw the hands up, the punches are to draw the movement that the guy's been using to get past the punches. Cheers, Ryan. Dear Jack, first of all, I want to thank you for your work. I'm a huge fan of your content, and I've been following you since you wrote an article on Fightland about Andy Hoog's axe kick. God, I wrote about 8 of those, to be honest. I was fleecing them a little bit by the end. I was like, well, there's not a lot going on this week. I might write another Andy Hoog axe kick article because I just love Andy Hoog. I'm writing to you today in reaction to your last few podcasts where you described Nurmagomedov's, it's not just Japanese names today, I'm just fucking struggling with words, Nurmagomedov's strategy of control against the fence, the strategy also used by Makhachev. In these podcasts, you theorized that any fighter facing Nurmagomedov might have a better option staying on their back, out in the open of the cage, rather than trying to wall walk to get back to their feet. It reminded me of a fighter that faced Makhachev a few years ago and recently defeated Shamil Zavurov, one of Habib's teammates. His name is Mansour Barnoui, and I think you will really enjoy what he displayed in both of these fights. Indeed, he managed to sweep Makhachev many times in their bout, and really gave him a run for his money. The same happened against Shamil. If you take the time to watch this last fight, you'll probably enjoy how Mansour is always getting away from the fence by pushing off it with his feet while being underneath Zavurov. It's a long message, and my English is not really good, but I thought you would appreciate to take a look at the unorthodox tactics of Mansour. Thank you again for all your from France. P.S. I already wrote you this message on Facebook. I don't know which address was the best, so sorry for the repetition. Thank you very much. Oh, he hasn't given his name, but thank you from France. I had great fun with this. I had great fun watching this. I thought, really? And then I went and watched it, and this lad, Mansour Barnoui, is really good. And then I looked into it, and he'd won the Road FC $1 million tournament. And I think he'd won the M1 lightweight title, the Road lightweight title. He'd fought for the KSW lightweight title, and he'd won the BAMMA lightweight title. And he's only 26. So he's really at the point where, anyone who knows about him, it seems, is saying, come on, let's get him in either Bellator or the UFC or ONE or something. He needs to be taking a step up because he's done everything he can, basically, on that B tier level, basically. But watching him fight, really fun. And if you haven't been here for the last few, where we talked about Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, Usman, people like that, who were very good at peeling people back off the fence, we were saying that too many guys, certainly guys like ATT, a lot of the ATT guys and things like that, I think Kyoji Horiguchi, even in the ring actually, Dustin Poirier, people like that, as soon as they hit the mat, they get up on their hands and scoot back to the fence, and they're sitting on the fence, and then they're going to get up. And you can always get up. It just, there are these guys like Khabib, Usman, Makhachev, who are very good at slowing that down and punishing you en route. And then when you're up, you can't disengage, so they'll just drag you back down. And we were talking about how doing that, it basically guarantees that you'll be able to stand up at some point. It might take you most of the 5 minutes of the round, but you'll finally get up. But you are giving up all submission attempts and all sweep attempts, basically. There are none you can hit from there. Certainly that I've seen yet, with the exception of like the odd guillotine where the guy sticks his head in and just gets lazy. So we were saying like guys who turn off the fence seem to do better in the sense that like Davi Hamos did well against Makhachev, and Nick Lentz and Saryukin both did well turning off the fence against Makhachev. Nick Lentz especially, actually, with his butterfly guard, did very well. And again, remember that we're talking in the sense that, overall, and what they were able to do in their time underneath. I think the wall walk was basically designed as a way of getting up eventually. It's not like a magic thing. It stopped being a magic thing shortly after Chuck introduced it. But I think now that you're getting to this point where guys are getting so good at stopping the wall walk, until there are some developments made on the defensive end of the wall walk, I think you need to start saying what is going to cost us less time and what can we be more effective doing. And I think being able to attack off your back with elbows and things like that and attack sweeps will be a better use of your time trying to get up from underneath out in the open than it would against the fence. So all that being said, Mansour Barnaoui, absolutely fantastic. He fought Makhachev in a ring, but the ring was the M1 ring, so they had the mesh on the bottom rope to the floor. So bit of a weird fight in that regard, because there were some moments where they were almost going through the ropes and things like that. But he did try and make sure that he was away from the fence. And against Shamil Zavurov, who's Habib's cousin, Habib was in his corner, Abdulmat was in his corner. He was going for the same stuff that Habib and Makhachev do. That one, Barnaoui was really deliberately turning himself off the fence. But if you want to go watch some Barnaoui, because I have never seen anyone hit the twist sweep or the giggler sweep, as it's sometimes called, more often in MMA. It's such a powerful sweep. Picture that you're in half guard. The opponent wants the underhook on the side of the leg that you've got trapped. Guys like Makhachev do really well. That's their main pass out in the open. And Nick Lentz and Saryukin did very well with their butterfly hooks, just sort of like bumping him over as he was trying to pass and then getting the underhook and coming up on it. Barnaoui constantly searches for the underhook and tries to like peek out and come up on the single, Lucas Lech style. But he'll also try and control that wrist a lot. And then when the opponent drives into him, he'll do, it's called a twist sweep or a giggler, but basically, like, imagine that you're on your side with your knees pointing in the direction you're facing. You turn to your back and you turn your knees across. And it's a really simple, stupidly simple motion. But if you time it well and you take out the post, you can sweep them right over. And Barnaoui does it all the time. He did it to Makhachev. That's all you need to know. I mean, it was 2013, so obviously both men have improved a bit since then. But it's still working the same way against his teammates and things like that. The other thing that he does is he also puts the hand in the hip quite a lot. And the other thing he does actually is he'll control the wrist on the side that they want the underhook, and then what you really want is the opponent to dive for the crossface, the shoulder of justice, it's sometimes called, because if you've got that hand trapped, you can roll them straight over as they dive for the crossface. So two of the very famous examples of this working are Andre Galvao in Strikeforce. He got to, I can't remember his name, is it Luke Stewart, something like that? But he got to this guy's half guard, and he dived for the crossface because that's how you pass the half guard. You just smash the dude. And obviously, Andre Galvao is very good at that. And the guy just rolled him straight over. And the guy's teammate, Sean Roberts, maybe? He did it in the gi to Rodolfo Vieira, who we just saw the other month in the UFC. But one of the all-time great guard passes just did it to him, easy as pie. Because it's basically punishing the instinct of diving on the head. And what Barnaoui does is he'll control the wrist, and then he's trying to like underhook the opponent's other arm and pull it towards his head to be like, please take the crossface. And also underhooking the other arm. This is something you'll hear Curtis Millender's corner calling for a lot. If you underhook the far arm from half guard, you can stop him hitting you in the face with it, which is quite nice, but it does also mean it's quite hard to get up if you're Curtis Millender. But yeah, cannot recommend enough watching Mansoor Barnoohi, because he has a bottom game that's actually effective in MMA. It's like him and Tony Ferguson. Like those are the two guys. Sorry, Ortega. There's only a few guys. Well, Ryan Hall. But okay, there's a few guys, but there's only a very few guys who are actually consistently effective from the bottom, and Mansoor Barnoohi is one of them. So now that I've jizzed over Mansoor Barnoohi, let's call it a day there, and we'll be back on Monday to talk about these fights. And thank God there's about 3 good events coming up back to back now. So really looking forward to the next few weeks. This is the way it seems to work now. It's like 3 good ones and then a shit one, and then you're like completely deflated, and then there's 3 good ones again. To be honest, I'm just really excited for Cannonier versus Hermansson. That's going to be an absolute banger. Anyway, if you want to hop in on the Patreon, it allows me to do this podcast twice a week, and we do extra stuff for the Patreon boys. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgoneby@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Everyone's going to gas because of the altitude and the smog, but try and enjoy it. Cheers.